Educational improvement is really hard. Schools are inherently conservative social systems. It's so much easier to educate students for our past than for their future. As parents, we get nervous when our children learn things we don't understand, and even more when they no longer study things that were so important for us. Teachers are more comfortable to teach how they were taught than how they were taught to teach. And as a politician, you can lose an election over education issues, but you can rarely win one, because it takes so much more than an election cycle to translate good intentions into good results. So changing education bureaucracies sometimes is like moving graveyards. It's hard to rely on the people out there to help you. Status quo has so many protectors. The biggest risk to schooling today isn't that it's inefficient, but that our way of schooling is losing its purpose and relevance. And when fast gets really fast, being slower to adapt makes education systems really slow and disoriented. We live in this world in which the kind of things that are easy to teach and test have also become easy to digitize and automate. Education has won the race with technology throughout history. But there's no automaticity it's going to do so in the future. Students who grow up with a great smartphone but a poor education are going to face unprecedented risks. Tomorrow's schools need to help students think for themselves and join others in work and citizenship. They need to help students develop a strong sense of right and wrong and a sensitivity to the claims that others are making. At home, at work, in the community, people need a deep understanding of how others think, whether as scientists or artists, and how others live in different cultures and traditions. Whatever tasks machines may be taking over from humans at work, the demands on our capabilities to contribute meaningfully to social and civic life is always keep rising. And that brings us right to the question of how to design a modern education system. The good news is that our knowledge about what works in education has improved vastly. The first thing I learned is that the leaders in high-performing education systems have convinced their citizens to value their future. Chinese parents and grandparents are going to invest their last money into the future, the education of their children. In Denmark and Europe, we have already spent the money of our children for our own consumption. But valuing education highly is just part of the equation. Another part is the deep belief that every student can learn. In some countries, students are segregated into different tracks at early ages, reflecting the notion that only some children can succeed. By contrast, in countries like Estonia, Canada, Finland, Japan, parents and teachers trust that all students can meet high standards. And that trust is manifested in student and teacher behavior. These systems have advanced from sorting human talent to developing human talent. They realize that ordinary students can have extraordinary talents. And nowhere does the quality of a school system exceed the quality of its teachers. Top school systems select and educate their teaching staff very carefully. And they provide an environment in which teachers work together to frame good practice. And they encourage teachers to grow in their careers. Top-performing school systems have moved on from administrative control and accountability to professional forms of work organization. They encourage their teachers to be innovative, to improve their own performance and that of their colleagues, and to pursue professional development that actually leads to better practice. In top school systems, the emphasis is not on looking upwards within the administration of the school system. It's about looking outwards to the next teacher and the next school, creating a culture of collaboration and strong networks of innovation. And the best school systems provide high-quality education across the entire system so that every student benefits from excellent teaching. To do that, these countries attract the strongest principals to the toughest schools and the most talented teachers to the most challenging classrooms. And still, knowledge is only as valuable as our capacity to actually act on it. To transform schooling at scale, we need not just a radical vision of what's possible, but also smart strategies to make change happen. The road of educational reform is littered with good ideas that were poorly implemented. And the laws, regulations, structures, and institutions on which we tend to focus are just like the small visible tip of an iceberg. The reason why it's so hard to move school system is that there is a much larger invisible part under the waterline. And that invisible part is about the interests, beliefs, motivations, and the fears of people who are involved in education, parents and teachers included. This is where the unexpected collisions occur, and you could see that very well in Denmark too, because this part of the education reform tends to evade the radar screen of public policy. That is why education leaders are rarely successful unless they build a shared understanding and collective ownership for change. And unless they build capacity and create the right policy climate with accountability measures designed to encourage innovation rather than compliance. But let us go back to teachers for a moment. We demand a lot from teachers. We expect them to have a deep and broad understanding of what they teach and whom they teach, because what teachers know and care about makes such a difference to student learning. That includes professional knowledge, such as knowledge about a discipline, knowledge about the curriculum of that discipline, and knowledge about how students learn in that discipline. Includes knowledge about professional practice, so teachers can create the kind of learning environments that lead to good learning outcomes. And involves inquiry and research skills that help teachers to be lifelong learners and grow in their profession. Students are unlikely to become lifelong learners if they don't see their teachers as lifelong learners. But we expect much more from our teachers than what appears in their job description. We also expect them to be passionate, compassionate, thoughtful, to encourage students' engagement and responsibility, to respond to students from different backgrounds with different needs, and promote tolerance and social cohesion, to provide continual feedback, to ensure that students feel valued and included, and to encourage collaborative learning. And we expect teachers themselves to collaborate and work in teams and with other schools and with parents, to set common goals and plan and monitor the attainment of those goals. And most people remember at least one of their teachers who took a real interest in their life and aspirations, who helped them understand who they are and discover their passions, and who taught them how to love learning. Attracting, developing, and retaining capable teachers and ensuring that every student benefits from excellent teaching remains an incredible challenge. What shapes the pool from which countries can select their teachers is a combination of the social status associated with the job of teaching, the contributions the candidate feels he or she can make while in the job, and the extent to which the work is financially and intellectually rewarding. It's relatively easy to make teaching more financially attractive. It's much harder to make teaching more intellectually attractive. But it's the latter that is the key to attracting highly talented individuals into the profession and keep them there, particularly as many people who go into teaching do so to make a difference to their society. It's hard because it depends on how the work of teachers is organized, the opportunities teachers have for professional growth, and how their work is regarded in the profession and by society. Given the rapid changes in education and the long careers of many teachers, teachers' development must be viewed in terms of lifelong learning, with initial teacher education the foundation for ongoing learning, not the summit of professional development. Such professional development needs to be continuous and include education, practice, feedback, and provide good time for follow-up. Rather than wait for a new generation of teachers, countries need to invest more in the existing schools and teachers, enlist their commitment to reform and supporting their improvement. Teachers in Singapore are entitled to 100 hours of professional development per year to stay up to date in their field and to improve their practice. Teacher networks and professional learning communities encourage peer-to-peer learning. The key is often not just a large amount of class-taking by serving teachers. It's the underlying career structures and how they interrelate with the time teachers work together in a form of social organization that both requires and provides new knowledge and skills that make the difference. Successful programs encourage the development of teachers' learning communities through which teachers can share their expertise and also their experiences. There's growing interest in ways to build cumulative knowledge across the profession. For example, by strengthening connections between research and practice, and encouraging schools to develop as learning organizations. The evidence from our TALIS studies suggests that professional development activities that have an impact on teachers' instructional practices are those that take place in schools and that allow teachers to work in collaborative groups. Teachers who work with a high degree of professional autonomy and in a collaborative culture, characterized by high levels of both cooperation and instructional leadership. Those are the teachers who reported that they participate more in-school professional development activities and that those activities actually had a greater impact on their teaching. Policy can do a lot to encourage genuine collaboration by establishing leadership development strategies that create and sustain learning communities, building indicators of professional collaboration into school inspection and accreditation processes, linking evidence of commitment to professional learning communities to performance-related measures of teacher competence, and by providing seed money for self-learning in and among schools. Successful education systems will also do whatever it takes to develop ownership of professional practice by the teaching profession. Some argue that you cannot give teachers and education leaders greater autonomy because they lack the capacity and expertise to deliver on it. And of course, that always holds some truth. But a response that simply perpetuates a prescriptive industrial model of teaching will continue to disengage teachers. Like someone who was trained to heat up pre-cooked hamburgers will rarely become a master chef. In contrast, productive learning always takes place when teachers feel a sense of ownership over their classroom, and students feel a sense of ownership over their learning. So the answer is to strengthen trust, transparency, professional autonomy, and the collaborative culture of the profession all at the same time. But the most essential reason why teachers' ownership of the profession is a must-have rather than an optional extra lies in the pace of change in 21st century school systems. Even the most effective attempts to translate a government-established curriculum into classroom practice is going to drag out over a decade, because it takes so much time to communicate the goals and methods through the different layers of the system and to build them into traditional methods of teacher education. In a fast-changing world, when what and how students need to learn changes so rapidly, such a slow process is no longer good enough because it inevitably leads to a widening gap between what students need to learn and what and how teachers teach. The only way to shorten that pipeline is to professionals teaching. That is, to ensure that teachers not only have a deep understanding of the curriculum as a product, but equally with the process of curriculum and instructional design and the pedagogies to enable the ideas behind the curriculum. In short, the changes in the demands of our societies have vastly outpaced the structural capacity of current governance systems to respond. The challenge is to build on the expertise of the teachers and school leaders and to enlist them in the design of superior policy and practice. Where education systems fail to engage teachers in the design of change, teachers will rarely help systems in the implementation of change. Successful policy implementation requires the mobilization of the knowledge and experience of teachers and school leaders, who can make the practical connections between the classroom and the changes that are taking place in the outside world. That is the fundamental challenge of policy implementation in our times. It is not accomplished just by letting 1,000 flowers bloom and asking parents to figure out what schools are best, but it requires a carefully crafted set of conditions that can unleash teachers and schools' initiative and build capacity for change. As the prescriptive approach weakens, the position of the classroom practitioners needs strengthening. While governments can establish directions and curriculum goals, the teaching profession needs to take charge of the instructional system, and governments need to find ways to enable and support professionalism. However, increased professional autonomy also implies challenging idiosyncratic practice. It means moving away from every teacher having their own approach towards the common use of practices agreed as effective, making teaching not just in art, but also more of a science. Paradoxically, the highly standardized industrial work organization of teaching has often left teachers alone in the classroom. 0% school autonomy has meant 100% teacher isolation behind closed classroom doors. Challenging this will hinge on effective leadership. Effective leadership is central to virtually every aspect of education, and most importantly so when there is little coherence and capacity in education. There are many great teachers, schools and educational programs in every education system. But it takes effective leadership to build a great education system. For education policy, it will also be important to get beyond the unproductive wrangling between forces pushing for greater decentralization and those aiming for greater centralization of the school systems that have often dominated the political debate also in Denmark. That debate actually detracts from the real question of what aspects of education are best managed at what level of the education system. And the overriding principle of subsidiarity, where every layer of the school system should continually ask itself how it can best support learners and teachers at the front line. System leaders need to be strategic, and that is being aware of how organizational policies and practices can either facilitate or inhibit transformation. And they need to be ready to confront the system where it inhibits change. They need to be design thinkers, capable of recognizing emerging trends and patterns and see how those might benefit or obstruct the innovation which they want to achieve. They need to be politically savvy in terms of working with organizations as well as with people. They need to use their knowledge about what motivates people to get them in support of their plans for change. And they need to use their understanding of power and influence to build the alliances and coalitions that are needed to get things done. Many teachers in schools are ready for that. To encourage their growth, policy needs to shift towards inspiring and enabling innovation, identifying and sharing best practice. And that shift in policy will need to be built on trust. Trust in education, trust in educational institutions, in schools, in teachers, in students, and communities. In all public services, trust is an essential part of good governance. Trust is the key determinant of where great people want to work. But trust cannot be legislated and mandated, and that's why it's so hard to build into traditional administrative structures. And trust is always intentional, and it's always related to professional competence. You trust your mother, but will you trust her to fly a 747? Trust can only be nurtured and inspired through healthy relationships and constructive transparency. At a time when command and control systems are weakening, building trust is the most promising way to advance and fuel modern education systems.